Okay, Valerie, go ahead.
Pop-up menu. All right. So hi, Pierre, I'm Valerie. I contacted you via email. And I'm the discussion leader for our International Book Bungalow. Let's see, I haven't met you before, but I know that some of the people in this group have, because you came to an author event in, what was it, 2020?
19.
Right?
19 before
Okay.
the pandemic.
Okay. Yeah. So, yeah, Tanya was very excited that you were going to get to come and join us. So anyway, I'd like to start. I usually start by asking everybody to share with us something that stood out or that they connected with the book first. And then I'd like to kind of guide us all through discussion. I'd like everybody here to feel free to ask questions as we go along. I've got, of course, a list here in case we don't get to all of them from our memory, but yeah. So let's see. Susan, would you like to start us off? Something that stood out to you or that you connected with?
Yes, I liked the idea of storytelling, and that stories can't bring the past back, but they can connect us to it. And I liked the way storytelling was used to either, well, mostly fabricating or rearranging the truth in people's lives. And I think a lot of people use that in telling their own stories. And I think that's a valid way, because you don't always like some of the things that happened in your past, so you recreate your life through storytelling.
And when you have brothers and sisters, they always have their own version of what happened.
And the oldest always knows because you weren't there.
Thank you, Susan. Virginia, you want to share with us?
I don't know why, but it makes me cry. So you just have to ignore that. When I started reading this book, the very first opening scenes that you set were just so beautiful. It's like, I've never been to the Middle East, but it's like, it just set this sense within that was just incredible. So thank you for that. And then your final words here in this book, both wishing the other person would find the courage to speak, and neither can do it. And I find that to be so apt, considering what the topic is with Song for the Missing People, for the missing. Obviously, it was a very moving book, so thank you.
Thank you very much.
Marilyn, share with us.
Just underlining what Virginia said, it was emotional in many parts for me as well. The grandma thread, maybe more than a thread, cable or whatever connected with you. Because I'm a grandma and my kids are all in their teens now, except for the great grandson, which some of you unfortunately heard about already. Just the importance of being a grandma, the importance of reaching out, and probably I could do a better job of being a better grandma from the insight that you shared with us. So loved the grandma all the way through, and the strength and the connection. I also found it profound on page 75 when it said, well, first of all, it said grandma gazed silently out the window, because I relate to that. Sometimes that's all I do is just watch my grandkids as I'm seeing them here at the house or wherever I see them. That silence talks a lot about the grandma, but also at the ruins that are happening. And it says Beirut is like a repair shop. The sound of construction downtown floated through the city, and anyway, just powerful words, powerful descriptions of the whole experience. Thank you so much.
Tanya.
Well, it really was a love letter to Lebanon and its people, certainly not its leaders, but its people. And it brought back so many memories. And I'm giving this book to my brothers and sisters for Christmas. So that's one of the reasons I wanted to record this, because I didn't want them to see this before they'd read the book. So I was struck by the framework that you used in telling this story or writing this song. The fact that you used a song framework, but also to me, and I think I reflected this in one of my questions I submitted to Valerie. To me, it was as if you dumped a whole puzzle down and we had to start putting the puzzle together. And generally you kind of get the outer edges going, and then you start seeing, oh, those look alike, and you start going with those, and then you pick up another one, it kind of strikes your fancy, and you start working on that section. And it was like that all the way through the reading for me, was you were just slowly giving a clearer picture as we went on. And I just thought, I didn't know if you intended it that way, but I was very struck by that. It wasn't your typical book where it's onion layers coming off to me. It was more bits and pieces here and there, and it came together like a tapestry or a mosaic at the end, and I loved it.
Thank you.
Shauna, you're on mute. Shauna, can you unmute yourself?
Let me ask her in chat.
Okay, I'll go ahead in the meantime. So I think that the thing that stood out the most to me, that I connected with most, was Amin constantly commenting and thinking about how he wanted to know more about his grandmother's past. He wanted to know about who she was and what she was about. And that was like constant. Even after she passed away, he was constantly learning new little bits and pieces about her. And he seemed to cherish every single one of those pieces that he could learn from her. Okay, so I think we'd like to talk a little bit about your author background first. Starting out with where you're living. Right now, are you still living in Germany?
Yeah, I live in Munich.
Okay.
So it's southern Germany.
Okay. And have you lived any place else as well?
I was born in Jordan. So when my parents left Lebanon in the 80s, I was born in Jordan. I spent there the first 3 years of my life, but I don't have any memories. I just know pictures. And then we went to Germany, and ever since I've lived here.
Okay. And did you go to college in Germany then as well, or you?
To university. I studied German and English literature.
Okay.
Yeah.
You're a poet first, right?
Yeah. I won't call myself that, because it might be an insult to real poets, but it's I mean, I did poetry slam, which is different, because you perform you perform on stage, and this means you also write differently. You write for a stage, while a poet writes for a reading audience. It's very different. So it's not real classic poetry, it's not real poetry, it's performance poetry. So yes, I did that for quite a while. In Germany, it's possible to make a living from that, because the poetry slam, opposed to the US, where it's very known, but it's not mainstream like in Germany. In Germany, it fills theaters, it fills hall, event locations with 2,000 people sometimes. So it's very different.
But you write like a poet.
Well, I'll take that.
I'm not going to let you argue with that.
Okay. I'm wondering, what is your current connection to Lebanon right now? Do you get to go and visit? Do you have family there?
Yeah, I will be there again in September. I have family there, like all of the family from my father's side
Mhm.
is still there. He's Lebanese.
Are
My
they in the
mother's German.
city or are they up in
They
the mountains?
they live in Zahle, they live in Beirut, they live in Anfe, which is a small town close to Tripoli. They are all over the country, but it's a tiny country, so being all over the country is not so difficult. And what was the other part of the question?
Just if you had family or if your
Yeah.
current connection to it. I am
Yeah.
wondering, though, how much of the upheaval affected you since you were living in Germany, since you were so young. How much of the civil war and the violence and everything affected you as you were growing up?
Honestly, I also wrote an essay in Germany about that. That it's kind of strange that I never considered myself, up until 2015 maybe, I never considered myself the son of refugees, because there never was any topic at home. You know, my mother is German, and the fact that they fled the country because of the war, because otherwise I probably would have been born there. It was never a topic. What I remember is my father not talking about, you know, his past. He was 18 when the war started, so a very important age. He never talked about it. This is what I remember. But I remember my mother, you know, really a kind of a relaxed way, remembering, telling us of how the war got more complicated and how it was better to leave. But I wouldn't call that an affection at all. I mean, what affected me was more the war of 2006, which is also in the book, because then I was old enough and I was about to travel to Lebanon. I had my flight ticket, and at the airport they told me you cannot go because just the war started. And so I would call 2006 more important, you know, because this is also when I started doing research. I wanted to know how could that happen, because to me it was surprising. So I started reading about the history, about politics, and this is when also my perspective on the country changed. I became more critical, more, yeah, you know, the more facts you know, the more realistic you can judge something, and that is what happened basically.
So when you said that you started looking more into the country, did you begin your research because you wanted to write the book, or did you start writing your book and then realize you need more research? Like how does that line up?
Yeah, the second part. I started to write a book, and then I realized very quickly that you cannot write about Lebanon without writing about politics, because everything is political there. And so I needed to do my research, and this is what I did. Then I stopped writing. I did the research for a couple of years actually, and then that was really helpful.
Did any of your research involve going back and visiting?
Yeah. Yes, also, of course, I talked to people, this is for the first book mainly.
The storyteller.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay. But for this book, did you?
I did. I talked to these women, you know, who are in their 70s and who miss someone, right? So someone, the members of the family, the families of the disappeared, basically. I talked to some of them, yeah.
Okay.
Can I jump in?
Yes.
I loved how, especially probably throughout the whole book, but towards the end, under a grain of sand, you said this story could have started in different ways at different times in different places, because that's how memory works, isn't it? And I love throughout the book how you would speak to us. And I felt like you were almost sitting across the room, because it's a different kind of reading. So often I just read really fast because it's a story I'm watching, but you kept pulling me in, and love that, because the way you spoke and used your narrative, it was just great.
Yeah,
Thank
he
you.
has a great voice. Yeah.
The structure was the most difficult thing.
Was
in
that
writing the
new
book.
for you to write that way?
I mean, it's only my second novel, so yeah, naturally, it was new somehow to write in any way a book. But the main difference was that the first book just took me 8 months to write this book, the first book, because everything after I did my research. So when I finished the research, I started writing again. It was finished after 8 months. Everything was clear to me. Then the translations came, and I did reading tours in Europe. I went to the US for a reading tour, and then I came home and I started writing the second book, or I was into the second book when I came to the US in 2019, and then I realized, okay, this will be very different, very different. This is the success of the first book was very surprising, and so I kind of felt of some pressure in writing this second book. It really was, yeah, so much different. I hope you won't hear. Do you hear the baby crying? It's
Okay.
time
Yes.
to sleep.
We've all heard it before.
Yeah.
I've got my
Yeah.
dog barking in the background at the air conditioning guy.
And you'll probably hear my tomcats fighting because it's getting close to their lunchtime. So yeah, we've got all kinds of things going on here.
Yeah, they got vaccinated today.
Oh,
Oh boy.
Yeah, probably
So
feeling
how
sick.
did you come up with the song? How soon did you have this title, or was this a title that your editors encouraged, or?
No, this was my idea, and only when I had this idea that things fell into place. For the most of part of the writing process, the book was called unovel.com doc, you know, and also the beginning, which you liked. I had the book has 450 pages roughly, and I deleted 350 pages while writing.
Wow.
wow.
And
I'm
it took me
glad. I mean, I'm sad, but I'm also glad.
it took me 4 years opposed to 8 months in the first book. So it was very, very different. Everything was different. I thought of somehow of a readership, you know, maybe expecting something. I wanted to show that I can even write a better book than the first one. That's what I wanted. So all these things, and you know, I started reflecting about writing. Before that, writing was just writing, and then it became something that I thought about while I wrote, and it was. It took me some time to shake that off. And with the structure, yeah, basically it's the very first sentence, the Persian phrase, you know, "Jeki bud, jeki nabud." It could have been this way, but it could have been differently. Which, when I had this, I realized, okay, yeah, this is what the whole book has to be about, because there is no truth. You have different stories of a truth, or you have truths, and this was the key. But it took me like a long time to get there. And I also wanted to reflect. To mirror the structure, like the way we remember things, right? Because we don't remember chronologically. We don't jump to 1994 and then we go all the way back to the present. We jump to 2006, to wherever we go back. It goes back and forth, and yeah.
Really liked about this book that yes, it is a storytelling, and a lot of storytelling might be chronological, and I'm going to read your first book now as a result of this saying, and it may be totally differently structured, but I love the way that it started here, and then a segment later, you're in a totally different place, and it was just, it worked. And it's like Tanya said, puzzle pieces coming together, and it really, to me, made the story actually with that different kind of structure that you used.
how in the world did you keep that all straight and pull all the strings together? And did you have other people reading and giving input, or your editor, or how? Because that seemed, it works so well, but it seems like such a difficult thing to do.
Yeah.
No, I usually don't show what I write to people. In this case, I started when I had 150 pages. I started to show it to my editor because we have a very close connection. It's not, he's not what many editors are like he doesn't try to write his own book through me, but he's very good in showing me if something doesn't work maybe, but he lets me find the solution. He doesn't, you know, it's very good. And I mean, the first book is also, there are many, when you read that, there are many false hints that you might follow before you realize, oh, it was completely different. And I like writing this way. And for me, it's kind of easy to keep that together. So I see what you mean, but maybe it's also my way of writing, because when I write, I do nothing else basically, and so I'm in this world for as long as it takes, which is not always healthy, but it's good for the book. It's very good for the book, because once you found the tone and you let it go for some time, it's very hard to find that tone again, and
Yes.
so all that helped in keeping it together. Yeah.
So you didn't keep a timeline of the events?
No, I did that with the first book, and I tried it with the second, but it didn't work. Yeah.
Amazing.
I wasn't, go ahead, Valerie.
I'm wondering, so you've had both of your books translated, and so how is it working with the translator?
It's very different. It really depends on the translator. The first book is translated into 7 countries, and there were translators that sent long documents with questions, and there were translators that never contact me once, but just one day I got the finished copy. So it's really different. So with the interesting thing is that the first book and the second book in English, there were different translators.
Really?
And I think it's just they, in both cases they did a great job, and I told you how I reflected on writing when I wrote the second book, and obviously I couldn't do that with the first book when it came to translation, thinking about translations, because I never expected it to be translated. With the second book, it was somehow clear that at least there might be an interest in translating that as well. So when I wrote that, there were some times when scenes when I thought, okay, this is going to be hard to be translated. For example, I don't, you know, I mean, sometimes he makes these lists in his notebook.
Yeah.
And at one point he's being funny about the lost eye of Jafar. You know, he's wondering where this eye might be, and it's kind of 8 or 7 bullet points where he's kind of, you know, having funny ideas, and it's very, the language is very playful, because it's all, he's keeping an eye on or whatever, and this is in Germany, of course, I put my sense of humor in that, but in this case, you cannot translate it word by word, because it's, you know, keeping an eye on is different somehow in German. It's not with the word eye, but you need the word eye. So the translator basically had to come up with things, and I think she did a great job. So it's basically her sense of humor, and so yeah, that might be a good example on how they sometimes have to preserve what you did by doing something new.
Yes.
Right.
So you write all your books in German?
I'm sorry?
You wrote in German? You
Yeah.
wrote your book in German?
Yeah.
But you said Okay, never mind. I'm confused. Said ion, they don't use ion in German, but
Yeah, I mean, I have I have something like that in German,
okay.
but yeah, and in the English is translation. I think it's something like keeping an eye on. This is the
Yeah.
English, but in German it's different. But you cannot just translate the German
Right,
version,
literally.
because then the word "I" wouldn't be in the English translation.
Yeah, translating idioms is difficult.
Yeah.
Yes.
I was also interested in the cover art, particularly because I do the social media for the book bungalow. And I posted a video about your upcoming book on TikTok, and they banned it because of the cover of your book.
They
Oh,
did.
Because they thought that it was violating minor safety, like they were worried about the safety of the child.
Yeah.
Cover art. So I was just wondering, like, how what's the process with the coming up with the cover art for your book? Is it different in each country, or how does
Yeah, I
that
think it's different because they have different markets. Basically, readers react differently in different countries based on their culture, on their whatever. So many things that what they're used to see, basically. So when the publisher sees, okay, this is the book and this is the possible audience, we need maybe this image to attract them to choose the book in the store and yeah, looking at it in the first place.
Do you have any of your other covers that you could show us?
It's in the room where the baby sleep
Okay,
or
never
try to
mind.
sleep right now. But I will send you. I will take a picture and send you an email. So
Okay.
that would be lovely.
I was interested in reading about the cover that the photographer actually used his son as a model.
Mhm.
yeah, I think this is at least in the German version. I'll send you the pictures. It's the same photographer for both covers. Interesting.
Well, I thought it was beautifully done.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I can't believe TikTok.
Yeah.
Or what I might have is the German. Yeah, let me get that. The German version of Song for the Missing.
Okay.
And yet they let all kinds of other things through on TikTok.
I know. That was what was shocking.
I know. And I was trying to like contact them through their help desk, and every time that I would contact them, I'd get like a computer generated response.
Oh, sure.
About safety.
Okay, so this is Song for the Missing in Germany, and the interesting thing is that it's a boy, and it's a real graffiti in Beirut. So without the text, of course, it's a picture of a boy, and you see the bullet holes in the houses.
Oh, yes.
Oh, yeah.
And so it's a real house, and this boy is a graffiti on that house. And you have bullet holes in that house, and so yeah, the windows, and it's a huge graffiti all across that house. And this is nice because
Is that a picture you took?
no.
Okay.
But yeah, I like the idea of because these houses play also a role in that in the book.
And where the Amin had to grab handholds as he was climbing, and turned out they were bullet holes.
Right.
Like, your imagery was just outstanding.
Yes.
Was I know this question isn't on Valerie's list, but I was wondering how the people in Lebanon and Beirut responded.
They are only now able to read it because they depend on the English and the French translation. There's no Arabic translation, but these are the languages they can read. The question is, will they? Because as you might remember, since 2020, when in the Beirut port the explosion happened, and they have other problems than books right now. It's really terrible, and there is economic crisis and hunger, and it's really bad. So I think some people are gonna read it. They read the first book. It was well received, I think, but with the second, I have no idea right now. It's difficult.
And the Lebanese communities that are spread throughout the world, have you had any feedback from them?
Yeah, there were many in France, and there are many in Canada also, and in the US, some in Michigan. There are many. Well, I don't know why, but usually they choose nice places, and but it's yeah, they liked it.
You're being modest. I bet they loved it. What are your parents still alive?
Yeah.
What did
My-
they think? Did you send them a copy?
Yeah, my mother, she read it. My father, I will give it to my father when I fly to Abu Dhabi on this Sunday, because I'm invited. He lives there, and I'm invited to the book fair in Abu Dhabi.
Oh, fun.
So I'm gonna take the children and let them meet their grandfather, and I'm gonna give him the copy then.
Okay.
So he hasn't read it yet. I tried sending it, but it came back. I don't know why. Sending kind of weird to send all the way there, but yeah.
What about, did your mother read it?
Yes, she also. I mean, this is going to be interesting on maybe if they read it differently, because her Lebanon for her life. She met my father there, and but it was just a couple of years in her life. So right, her memories are maybe different, maybe more romanticized towards the country than my father. So I'm going to have to drink.
That's okay. I saw that you got a grant from the Goethe Institute. We had, was that the one in Beirut, or it's there in Germany?
So there are Goethe institutes basically in all countries, and depending on the translation, so if you're talking about the English translation, it probably was in New York, the Goethe Institute they usually fund translations.
The Goethe Institute in Beirut was just down the street from us.
Yeah, they have been, and they moved. And
oh,
a couple
then
of years,
okay, they were just down the street in the 70s. They're probably somewhere else now.
But also in the explosion, the building was damaged.
Yeah.
I'd like to talk a little bit now about the plot of your story. And I had several people in the group wondering, like, how much of this story is autobiographical? How much of this is you in this, and how much of this is just purely from your own imagination?
I mean, it's always hard to really, because I think most of that happens unconsciously. But I would say almost nothing is autobiographical, while in the first book, many things are, most. I mean, in the first book, it's the story about a son looking for his father who has disappeared. This is not my story, but everything that kind of goes on inside the character when he's romanticizing Lebanon as a kid, he goes there, he starts to realize, okay, this is not paradise on earth, and his perspective changes. This is me, basically. But in the second book, maybe this was also why it was kind of harder to write it, because it had basically nothing to do with me. I had to come up with everything.
So none of the characters are based on anyone you know, like your grandmother?
No. I mean, okay, the grandmother is based on all the women I talked to. You can say that, but it's not my family. It's many members of the disappeared inside one character.
Okay.
Wow, that's quite a testament to character development then, because I would have thought you would have known somebody similar to Jafar or somebody with one eye or something like that. But for you to have totally out of your imagination created this is remarkable.
Thank you. Yeah, it's what I like about writing. You know, it's inventing, coming up with things.
Truly is. Wow.
Because the characters were so believable and had such depth. It was interesting that they were always hiding so much from themselves or each other, and yet they seemed so complex.
I mean, what I can tell you is that it's also, this is evolved. I mean, in the because I told you that I deleted 350 pages. I didn't write 350 pages, then deleted and started new, but all together while writing, when I deleted, I did in the sum is 350 pages, but I wrote 150, which I then deleted and before I started new. And in this version, and that's interesting maybe when it comes to character development. The comic, the drawer, you know, they meet.
Yes.
Yeah.
In the very first version, he was the main character.
Oh,
Interesting.
Oh.
And Jaffa was just a side character. I didn't really know if I needed him in any way. And when I wrote, I realized, okay, there's not much to say about this comic person. Maybe he's just a metaphor, which in the version now he is.
Yeah.
And when I wrote, I realized, okay, maybe about this guy with one eye, he's more interesting. Maybe he is the one, you know, that needs to be put in the center. So basically, while writing, they are strangers, and you meet them, and you learn more about them the more time you spend with them, and then you realize, okay, I didn't think you were interesting, but you are, and I thought you were interesting, but you aren't. So yeah.
Interesting.
I mean, I would have sworn that this was based on autobiographical events, right? I mean, that's how deeply you got into it and developed those characters. So a lot of insights then about human nature
Yeah.
that you have.
And the historical events, I wasn't even aware of the bank that
Mhm.
talk about, because that was before my time, and the character, what's his name? The one who got arrested and convicted.
Samia Gachi.
Yeah, I wasn't aware of him. You know, the Amin Jamal and those others, yes, I knew about, but are there any political ramifications for you to be calling out some of these?
To be honest, I don't know. I will be there in September, and that's what I'm gonna find out.
You better have a
But
bodyguard. I don't trust.
I talked to my publisher, and I told him maybe we need some kind of, you know, backup plan in case I don't get back to you 4 hours after I landed. So maybe yeah, really. So maybe you need to contact the embassy then, and you know, just let's figure out something. I don't think anything will happen.
No, probably not.
But
Yeah.
I'm at a point where I think, okay, maybe it's smart just to have a backup plan. If you don't need it, you don't need it. But yeah, I mean, I don't even think these persons would do something, but they have, you know, they have crazy followers.
Yes.
Yes. Yeah.
What did you think? Have you been following? They had the election that
Yeah.
was announced yesterday. What do you think about the results of that?
I mean, it's a very small step, but it's still, for Lebanon, it's remarkable that you know, Hezbollah lost the votes, and that there's some kind of protest within these you know, electoral outcome. There's still a long way to go, and the whole system is rigged and corrupt, and it's hard to change.
Yeah.
But it was somewhat a statement, you can say. It won't change anything, but it's a statement.
Yeah.
Suppose that
Go
that
ahead.
links in nicely. Do you see any hope for peaceful, democratic governance for this country, for the country of Lebanon going forward?
It's difficult because the young people are leading the country, and if you want change, you need the young generation, because the elders they are either used to things or they don't have the the will to change something. So we're talking about the generation born after the war. So basically, the only innocent generation in this country. But they are leaving the country. They're in this economic environment that there is right now. Even my cousin, who's 27, he left last year to Qatar to go to work there. And I mean, Qatar isn't a great country either,
Right.
to be a guest worker, but it's still much better than Lebanon. So and this is the main problem, because how you're going to change something when the smart people, they study they give everything that they have to study. Parents, they sell their land to get money to make their child study, and when they studied, they leave the country.
Yeah.
And this is, so how are you going to change something? This is the biggest problem.
That's so interesting. For the last 10 years, I lived in a very, very small town in the United States, Page, Arizona. I think only 7,000 people live there. But we talk about that all the time. Like, parents will send their kids off to go get an education with the hopes that they'll become doctors or business people in the community, and they never come back. It's interesting that this is like on a larger scale with the country versus a small community, but it's the same problem. Every time we lose the young people, and things become bad.
Yeah, my high school there, I think, is still going, but they're having problems with fundraising because it seems so hopeless. It's kind of baked in because of their whole confessional system, which just allows for the people to stay separated into their tribes or their religious groups. And it's hard to have democracy when religion is baked into it.
Sounds like the US.
Yeah.
I mean, when I do my readings here, I explain a lot about the country. I show pictures and I tell them, how when I talk about the corruption, I talk, that the minister for economy is, for example, the son-in-law of the president, and so on, everything. And they are like, oh yeah, this is so typical for Arab countries. And I'm like, wait a minute, because what we have witnessed in the US for years, it's, you had a son-in-law, you had a daughter. It's basically it's power. It's not about culture. It's
That's right.
about power.
And I think you addressed that in the talk, going back and forth between Amin and Sahar at the end. There are a lot of loose ends or even future lookings that you address in that segment, and kind of ties it up. I thought one of the other images that you are a good storyteller, just saying. Okay. But where you bring that piece in about going down into the underworld and how you can totally erase and not have any memories. And that's a very different space than not exploring the memories and just addressing that. And a way too, that's what you're speaking to here about the future. There's so many things that are held in place by those past experiences that it's hard to get on, hard to move along with it. So yeah, regardless of which country you're in, sort of, yeah.
I wanted to ask when you came across the Hakawati, that whole
Yeah.
was wonderful. Did you come across it long before writing this book or in the research for this book?
Before that, I mean, that's part of the culture in all the Middle East. Is some it today it has more become a kind of a attraction, a tourist attraction. Some on the markets, you know, you have a storyteller standing on a on some a little bit higher, talking to the people. But that I knew that, of course. I didn't know from the beginning that I wanted that in the book, but at some point I thought that you know, having some kind of teacher, a storyteller teaching someone storytelling, and this person then becomes the storyteller of his own story, and somehow enabling him, you know, to tell. And maybe also through the grandmother. It's not clear in the book if the grandmother intended, you know, sent him to the museum because she knew that would happen, so to encourage him without saying it, or if it came by chance. But I thought that, you know, it gave me the chance to talk about the tradition, but also to it had a function for the story.
Huge function.
I loved the way in the final dialogue, the discussion with Sahara about the Scheherazade and the tales, and how the family never got to the end of them and showed the warriors, the women out there taking their lives into their own hands. And I thought that was such a lovely way of wrapping up that part of the story by bringing in that tale. How did that come about in your writing, in your thinking?
With Sahar, it was also in the first version I told you about, when the comic person was she was, I wanted her to be a blogger, to be because if you remember the uprising in 2011, the Arab Spring, it all happened through Facebook. It was called the Facebook Revolution because they organized in Facebook groups, and all the demonstrations that happened on the streets, they started on Facebook. And so this is why it's Facebook dialogue in the end. So I kind of preserved the internet, you know, part for her story. And I don't know. I still think she's a very she might be maybe she's returning in some years to me, maybe because I think she's a very interesting, and she has too little space in that book. Her story is too big. With the sometimes these things just you do your research and you realize, you read something and you instantly know this. I can use that. And with the Scheherazade part of that story, I just came by chance. I sometimes I read something on Wikipedia and I click on the footnote down there, with you know, where the citations are, and so where they have the information from. And if you start doing that, you things open up and everything over, and you go deeper and deeper. And so in the end, you cannot really say how you stumbled across anything, but it's basically by chance. And this is a perfect example, by chance, but instantly knowing, it was worth it because it's usable. You read a lot of things that you cannot use. It's sometimes doing research is depressing. You can use 1% basically. You learn a lot, so you can talk for hours about all the things you know now, but you cannot use anything of that your book except for maybe 1%.
Valerie, I'm going to jump in with one more because I want Pierre, I want you to talk about the importance of the painting and how that is such an important character throughout the whole book. Just talk a little about that.
So you mean the painting of the mother of the grandmother?
The one that the mother did.
Yeah.
So the song for the missing painting.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean it's somehow the mother being in the story without appearing in the story. It's also showing that it's not only literature or storytelling that somehow can contribute to, you know, finding identity or to finding truth, but also it's arts in general. It's the theater also. You have the theater.
Yes.
So I wanted to have different arts in the book, the storytelling, the painting, the theater, to show that maybe it's the artists, you know, in the end, that it's if it's not the society, and if it's of course not the politicians, maybe it's on the artists to tell, and you know, and it doesn't necessarily need the spoken word or the written word. It can be paintings, it can be and it can be the theaters or whatever. And so it basically just for me in the context of art, the importance of art, and
plus the music that was the framework for the book.
Yeah.
Right.
True.
It's so interesting. Oh, the character who was responsible for that family and yet kept holding back everything until near the very end. And the key in that picture, which became the key ways to his next steps, his ability to really kind of sort through and settle in a way, and in his homeland there. Yeah, very, the intertwinings of your tapestry pieces.
It's very good at putting mystery,
Yeah.
making a literary mystery. And he does that with the storyteller too.
Yeah. And just leaving it to everybody else's imagination. Like, oh, okay, maybe this is the way it happened for, I called him Jafar, I may not be saying it right. Maybe this is the way, this is what happened in his younger years before Amin met him. But it could be a whole different story. I mean, just that presentation of a possibility of a way. But you did answer the question why he suddenly had to run out and call.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, and, yeah. Commentaries on my part, not so much questions.
So what are you, you said you might involve twins next in your next book, but what are you working on?
Okay, so this book came out in 2020 in March, and we had high expectations, and then it basically came with the pandemic. They both came at the same time. So it was, you know, my tour was canceled. You know this from all your authors. It basically it hit everybody. So it wasn't a success as the first book, and it took me a while to shake that off. So I didn't write during the pandemic, and then we had the pregnancy and the baby's coming last year, and with the twins it was impossible to write anything for 12 months. And also I didn't want it to work so much because I wanted to watch them. And now I have rented myself a room outside the apartment to work, because you know, it's not possible here anymore, and I'm writing again. And I just yesterday I sent it my application for a scholarship with a new text. I have 30 pages. It's not so much, but it's gonna be. I know I'm gonna be much quicker. It won't take me 4 years again, because I learned so much during the second book. I knew that, you know, it's okay just to write and then not being satisfied, just delete it, start new. I'm not gonna write 150 pages knowing this might not work, which I did. You know, I'm much quicker now in realizing when something works. So I learned a lot, and I will be faster, and also I have fun again writing. This is because I didn't enjoy very much writing the second book. Sometimes it was the worst thing. Really, because sometimes I was about to call my agent and say, tell them we're not writing. We give them back their money. We're not writing anything. It was terrible, and but now I want to write again, and
we're glad
because I know I'm more mature writer, I think, and I think the second book is probably the most difficult for anyone writing, the end of writing, because you have to confirm, are you a one-hit wonder, or can you really write? even though, you know, it's not, hasn't sold that much because of the circumstances, it's the better book, I think, or at least it's more mature. And you can see a step forward, I think. And so knowing that makes me confident that this third book will be, and it will also focus, not focus on the civil war. Because there are, in Lebanese history, there are episodes that are even funny. You know, things happen that are, you know, from looking back at them now, they are even ridiculously funny. So I want to write something that is more, that has depth, of course, that has also tragedy, but that is somehow the tone of the book. I want you to smile all the time, but at the same time, maybe fearing that at the next page it might, you know, it might turn. So yeah.
What time period?
For example, in the 60s, in the beginning of the 60s, there was something that has been basically forgotten, but it's well documented, but nobody remembers it. It's the so-called Lebanese Rocket Society, which was a group of students. Okay, you have to remember the 60s, it's basically US and UdSSR,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
on the way to the moon. And in Lebanon, you had a group of students just, you know, as a hobby, building rockets from, you know, just, and then they started firing them. And the first rocket in 1960, it flew 1 kilometer. It almost made a ship sink in the ocean. It was, but it was, you know, they just tried, and they got better, and their program got better. And in 66, so only 6 years later, they built a rocket which reached outer space.
Really?
Yeah, and so you had suddenly not only the whole country, but the whole region dreaming about, okay, what if an Arab will be the first man on the moon? You know, it's a great story, and it's funny, I think, because if you think now of tiny Lebanon having a rocket program while US and UdSSR and NASA and you know, everything that's going on, competing with them, that's very funny. This won't be the story of the book, but it's part of the story. So, you know, there's also, you know, a time frame. Also the explosion in 2020 will be in the book, but it's
Wow. And we didn't talk about that book much, but that's because you're here and we wanted to delve into your brain, your writer's brain about this.
Yes.
Did you have anything else you wanted to ask, Valerie?
I think we've gotten through quite a few questions. I know we weren't going to get through all of them, but I think that we covered quite a lot. And thank you so much for joining us today. It's been very interesting, very fun to talk with you.
Yes, thank you, Pierre. And I will send the link to the recording, not only to all of you, but to, I know we missed a few others who didn't get it. But anyway, thank you. Good luck in all of your writing, Pierre.
thank you.
And get some more sleep if you can.
Or get used to no sleep. Some of us have to do that too.
Yeah.
Good luck with your twins.
Thank you very much. Thank you for reading the book, and yeah, maybe see you again in person.
I hope
with
so.
the third book, if that somehow works, we'll see.
Okay, all right. Goodbye.
Thank
Bye.
you. Bye.